The sky had turned black 17 days ago, not from clouds or storms, but from the shadows of 1,000 warships that hung above Prime like a death sentence waiting to be spoken. The Dominion had come to take another world, and the peaceful people have had no way to stop them. Elder stood in the deepest chamber of the underground sanctuary, watching the hollow screens flicker with images of destruction. His crystalline body, once bright with the soft blue glow of his people, had grown dim with despair. Around him, millions of huddled in the dark tunnels beneath their cities, listening to the endless thunder of orbital bombardment above their heads. They were not warriors. They had never been warriors. For 10,000 years they had lived in peace, building beautiful cities of crystal and light, creating art and music that other species traveled across the galaxy to witness. They had no weapons worth speaking of. They had no soldiers worth counting. They had nothing but hope, and that hope was dying with every passing hour. Counselor approached the elder, her translucent form flickering with fear. She was young by standards, barely 300 years old, but the weight of these terrible days had aged her beyond measure. She carried a data tablet in her delicate hands and could see from her dimming glow that the news was not good. "The outer shields have failed," she said quietly. "The ground forces will breach the surface within 6 hours. Our remaining defense stations have been destroyed. There is nothing left between them and our people." Closed his luminous eyes. He had known this moment would come. From the first day the fleet appeared in their sky, he had known. The Dominion had crushed 47 civilizations across the galaxy. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they did not need. They showed no mercy because they did not understand the concept. To them, other species were resources to be harvested or obstacles to be eliminated. "What of our distress signals?" asked, though he already knew the answer. Looked down at her tablet. They responded 3 days ago. They expressed sympathy but stated that military intervention would destabilize their trade agreements with border worlds. The Assembly declared official neutrality this morning. They sent a message saying they were too far away to provide assistance in time. She paused, her light flickering. No one else has responded at all. Moved slowly to the great window that looked out over the underground city. Thousands of his people filled the crystal streets below, families holding each other, children crying, elders preparing for death. They had done nothing wrong. They had threatened no one. They had simply existed in a galaxy where existence was not enough to guarantee survival. "We reached out to every known species in the galactic community," he said softly. "Every civilization we have ever contacted, every world we have ever traded with, and not one of them will come to help us." Stood beside him, her glow mingling with his fading light. "There was one response I did not mention, from a species in the outer rim, a young race called humans. They acknowledged our signal, but they are so far away and so new to space travel. Their fastest ships would take nearly 2 days to reach us, and they have no fleet capable of challenging the. It would be suicide for them to try." Nodded slowly. He had heard of humans. Most species in the galaxy had heard of them by now. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago and had been stumbling around the edges of civilized space ever since. The galactic community considered them curious but unimportant, like children who had just learned to walk. Brave perhaps, and certainly stubborn, but utterly insignificant in the grand scale of things. "Then we are truly alone," said. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space that most advanced civilizations did not bother to mark on their maps, the human carrier Relentless Dawn cut through the darkness between stars. Commander Jake stood on the bridge, reading the distress signal for the 5th time. His hands gripped the data tablet so hard that his knuckles had turned white. Jake was 43 years old, with gray starting to show at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many battles and not enough sleep. He had served in the United Earth Fleet for 20 years, and he had seen things that would break most people. But something about this distress signal made his blood burn in a way he had not felt in a long time. Lieutenant Kate approached him carefully. She was his second in command, a sharp woman in her early 30s with red hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and eyes that missed nothing. She had served with Jake long enough to know when he was about to do something either brilliant or insane, and she suspected this was going to be one of those moments. "Sir, I have Admiral on the secure channel. She wants to know why we have altered course without authorization." Jake looked up from the tablet. "Tell her I am on my way." He walked to the communications room with Kate following close behind. The hollow screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Maria, commander of the Third Fleet. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and a gaze that could cut through steel. "Commander, you want to explain why your battle group is burning hard toward space instead of completing your patrol route." Jake straightened his spine. "Admiral, we intercepted a distress signal from Prime. The Dominion has them under siege. Their shields are failing. They have hours at most before the ground forces overwhelm them." "I am aware of the situation," said flatly. "Command has already reviewed the tactical assessment. The fleet in that sector numbers over 300 vessels. You have 12 ships under your command. The mathematics do not favor intervention." "The mathematics never favor intervention, Admiral. That is not why we should go." Leaned forward. "Then tell me why we should send 12 ships and 4,000 sailors to die in a battle we cannot win for a species we have never met." Jake took a breath. "Because they asked for help. Because they are innocent people being slaughtered by an enemy they cannot fight. Because every other civilization in the galaxy turned their backs, and if we do the same, then we are no better than any of them." He paused. "Because it is the right thing to do." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Kate watched the exchange with her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that Jake was risking his entire career, possibly his freedom, on this single conversation. Finally spoke. "You have 48 hours to reach Prime. I am dispatching the 5th and 7th carrier groups to follow as soon as they can be mobilized. Do not die before they arrive, Commander." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Understood, Admiral." The screen went dark. Kate exhaled slowly. She actually authorized it. Jake turned to face the bridge crew, all of whom were watching him with a mixture of fear and determination. "You heard the Admiral. Set course for Prime, maximum burn. And someone wake up Sergeant Cole. Tell him the 77th is going to war." The relentless dawn surged forward into the darkness, carrying 4,000 human souls toward a battle that every tactical computer in the fleet said they could not win. But humans had never been very good at listening to computers. Supreme Commander stood at the center of his command ship, watching the final preparations for the ground assault with cold satisfaction. His massive body towered over his subordinates, his 4 arms folded across his armored chest, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical displays that showed Prime laid bare before his forces. In less than 6 hours, another world would fall to the Dominion. Another species would learn the true meaning of conquest. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had built their empire on a simple philosophy. The strong take what they want, and the weak suffer what they must. It was not cruelty in their eyes. It was simply the natural order of things. Species that could not defend themselves did not deserve to exist. The universe was harsh, and they had learned to be harsher. Had personally overseen the destruction of 11 worlds. He had watched civilizations burn and felt nothing but the cold efficiency of a job well done. There would be no different. They were soft creatures of light and crystal, utterly incapable of fighting back. Their deaths would be quick and profitable. "Supreme Commander," his sensor officer called out, his voice carrying an unusual tone of confusion. "We are detecting hyperspace disturbances at the edge of the system." Turned one of his compound eyes toward the display. "Reinforcements from the Dominion." "Negative, Supreme Commander. The signatures do not match any vessels." The officer paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. 12 ships have emerged from hyperspace. Configuration unknown. Scanning now. The display flickered and resolved into the image of the approaching vessels. They were unlike anything in the database. Angular and blocky, covered in what appeared to be primitive armor plating and studded with weapon systems that looked almost crude by galactic standards. There was nothing elegant about these ships. They looked like tools designed for a single purpose, and that purpose was violence. Identification demanded. The ships are broadcasting identification signals. They originate from a system called Sol in the Outer Rim. The officer checked his readings twice before continuing. Species designation, human. A ripple of amusement passed through the command bridge, made a sound that served as laughter among his people, a harsh clicking that echoed off the metal walls. He had heard of humans. Every species in the galaxy had heard of them by now. They were the new arrivals, the primitive newcomers who had barely figured out how to travel between stars. They were considered a curiosity at best, a joke at worst. 12 ships, said slowly, savoring the absurdity. They send 12 ships against 300. Either these humans are insane or they are too stupid to understand basic arithmetic. His tactical officer stepped forward. Shall I dispatch a squadron to eliminate them, Supreme Commander? Waved a clawed hand dismissively. Send 30 ships. I want this over quickly. We have a planet to conquer. 30 warships broke formation and moved to intercept the human fleet. On any tactical display, the outcome was obvious. The humans were outmaneuvered and outnumbered by nearly 3-1 in this engagement alone. The full fleet waited behind them with 270 more vessels. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. On the bridge of the relentless dawn, Commander Jake watched the enemy approach with a calm expression that hid the fire burning in his chest. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with focused determination. They all knew the odds. They had all volunteered anyway. 30 ships incoming, Kate reported from her station. They will be in weapons range in 4 minutes. Jake nodded. Only 30. They really do not think much of us, do they? Sergeant Cole stood near the back of the bridge, watching the tactical display with eyes that had seen more combat than most soldiers would experience in 10 lifetimes. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then cracked a few times for character. He commanded the 77th Orbital Drop Regiment, 300 soldiers who had trained for years to do the impossible. Good, said quietly. Overconfidence makes them sloppy. Jake opened a channel to the entire fleet. His voice carried across 12 ships, reaching the ears of 4,000 men and women who had traveled across the galaxy to fight for strangers they had never met. All ships, this is Commander. In a few minutes we are going to engage an enemy that outnumbers us, outguns us, and thinks we are not worth taking seriously. They have conquered dozens of worlds. They have destroyed entire civilizations. They believe they are invincible. He paused, letting his words sink in. They are wrong. Down on that planet, millions of innocent people are waiting to die because no one else in this galaxy had the courage to help them. We are here because someone had to be. We are here because it is right. So let us show these bugs what humanity is made of. All ships, weapons free. Make them remember this day. The human fleet surged forward to meet the enemy. What followed was not the quick execution they had expected. The human ships fought with a ferocity that all tactical logic. They used maneuvers that no sane species would attempt, pushing their engines beyond safe limits, accepting damage that would have crippled vessels from other civilizations. They fought like creatures that did not care about their own survival, only about making the enemy pay for every meter of space. The relentless Dawn took the lead, her weapon systems blazing with continuous fire. Jake watched as 2 ships exploded under the concentrated assault of his fleet, then 3 more. The enemy was faster and more maneuverable, but the humans absorbed punishment and kept coming. Hull breach on Deck 7, Kate reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. Damage control teams are responding. Keep firing, Jake ordered. Do not give them time to regroup. The battle raged for 2 hours. The squadron, expecting an easy victory, found themselves fighting for their lives against an enemy that refused to die quietly. When it was over, 18 vessels had been destroyed. The humans had lost 2 ships, but the survivors kept fighting, kept pushing forward toward the planet. On his command ship, Supreme Commander watched the battle reports with growing disbelief. His mandibles clicked in agitation as he processed what he was seeing. These humans should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they had cut through his squadron like a blade through soft tissue. "Send 50 more ships," he ordered, his voice carrying a new edge of concern. "No, send 100, destroy them now." But as the fleet mobilized, something else appeared on the sensors. Drop pods were launching from the human carriers, streaking toward the surface of Prime. The humans were not just fighting in space. They were sending soldiers to the ground. Cole sat in his drop pod, surrounded by the men and women of the 77th. The pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere, flames licking past the viewport. Around him, 300 soldiers checked their weapons and said their prayers. 30 seconds to impact, the automated voice announced. Looked at his soldiers, these brave fools who had followed him across the galaxy to fight an impossible battle. He smiled grimly. "Remember your training, remember why we are here, and remember that every you kill is one less monster hurting innocent people." He chambered a round in his rifle. 77th, prepare to drop. We have a planet to save. The pod slammed into the surface of Prime, and humanity arrived to change everything. The drop pod hit the ground with enough force to crack the crystal surface beneath it. Sergeant Cole was out before the hatch finished opening, his rifle up and scanning the alien landscape. Around him, dozens of other pods slammed into the terrain, each one carrying soldiers of the 77th Orbital Drop Regiment. They had landed in what appeared to be a city square, though calling it a square did not do it justice. The buildings rose like frozen waves of colored glass, their surfaces catching the light of the distant sun and scattering it into rainbows. Even in the middle of a war zone, could not help but notice the beauty of this place. These had built something remarkable, and they were tearing it apart. "All units report in," commanded through his helmet radio. The responses came quickly. "First platoon ready. Second platoon ready. Third platoon, 2 casualties on landing but operational." Within 60 seconds, had 280 soldiers assembled and ready to fight. Private Amy reached his position first. She was small but fierce, with dark hair cut short and eyes that never stopped moving. She had grown up in the slums of New Chicago and had joined the military to escape poverty. Now she was on an alien world, preparing to fight monsters for people she had never met. Life was strange that way. "Sergeant, I am picking up weapons fire to the east," Amy reported, checking her scanner. "Heavy energy signatures. Infantry, at least 50 of them. They are moving toward what looks like a civilian shelter." Felt his jaw tighten. "Then that is where we are going. First platoon on me. Second and third secure the landing zone and establish a perimeter. We move in 2 minutes." The streets of the city were both beautiful and horrifying. Crystal towers that had stood for centuries lay shattered across the ground. Bodies have dotted the streets, their translucent forms no longer glowing, their light extinguished forever. Had seen death before, had caused plenty of it himself, but there was something especially terrible about seeing these peaceful creatures cut down in their own homes. They heard the fighting before they saw it. The sharp crack of energy weapons mixed with screams in a language the humans could not understand. Raised his fist, signaling his platoon to halt, then moved forward with Amy and Corporal Danny Brooks to scout the situation. What they saw made his blood run cold. A group of soldiers had surrounded the entrance to an underground shelter. Inside, hundreds of huddled together, their crystalline bodies flickering with fear. They were not trying to breach the entrance. They were simply firing into the crowd, taking their time, enjoying the slaughter. Danny made a sound of pure disgust. He was a big man from Texas, with a thick accent and an even thicker sense of justice. Those bastards are killing them for fun. Did not waste time on words. First platoon, weapons free, kill them all. The humans hit like a thunderstorm. They had the advantage of surprise, and they used it ruthlessly. Amy took down 3 soldiers before they even knew they were under attack. Danny charged forward with a battle cry that echoed off the crystal walls, his rifle blazing. Moved with cold precision, placing each shot exactly where it needed to go. They were fearsome warriors. Their bodies were covered in natural armor, their claws could tear through steel, and they had been bred for combat across countless generations. But they had never faced anything like humans before. They had never encountered a species that fought with such controlled fury, such absolute commitment to violence. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, 50 soldiers lay dead on the crystal streets, and not a single human had fallen. Amy approached the shelter entrance, her rifle lowered but ready. The inside shrank back from her, their lights dimming with terror. They had never seen a human before. They did not know if this strange creature in armor was friend or enemy. Stepped forward, removing his helmet so they could see his face. He was sweaty and tired, and there was blood on his armor that was not his own. He probably looked terrifying to these gentle beings, but he tried to make his voice soft. "We are here to help," he said slowly, hopping the translation software in his suit was working properly. "We are humans. We came because you called for help. You are safe now." An elderly moved forward from the crowd. His crystalline body was cracked and dim, but there was something in his bearing that spoke of authority. He looked at for a long moment, studying this alien creature that had appeared from nowhere to save his people. "Why?" he asked, his voice like wind chimes in a soft breeze. "Why would you come so far to die for strangers?" Thought about the question. He thought about all the reasons they had been given in training, all the speeches about duty and honor and the expansion of human influence. None of that felt right. "Because you needed help," he finally said, "and we could give it." The light grew slightly brighter. "Remarkable," he whispered. There was no time for more conversation. Received a report from 2nd Platoon that a large force was moving toward their position. He ordered his soldiers to establish defensive positions around the shelter entrance. They would protect these people or die trying. The next 6 hours were the longest of his life. They came in waves, each assault larger than the last. They threw everything they had at the human positions, certain that these primitive mammals would break under pressure. They were wrong. Specialist Grace Palmer set up her heavy weapon at the main intersection and held it against 3 consecutive assaults. Corporal Ben Torres rigged explosive traps that took out an entire squad. Private Amy moved through the battle like a ghost, appearing where she was needed most, her rifle never silent for long. They took casualties. Of course they took casualties. Humans were not invincible. They bled and died just like any other species. But every human who fell was carried to safety by their comrades. Every wound was treated. Every soldier who could still hold a rifle kept fighting. Elder had made his way to the surface to witness the battle firsthand. He watched these strange creatures from another world throw themselves into combat again and again, never retreating, never surrendering. He watched a human soldier take a plasma blast meant for a child, going down hard but still managing to shoot her attacker before she fell. "They are willing to die for us," he said to Counselor who stood beside him. "They do not know us, they have nothing to gain, yet they are willing to die." Watched as Danny Brooks charged into a group with nothing but a combat knife, screaming something in his strange human language. He took down 2 of them before his squad could reach him. "I do not understand these creatures," she said softly. Felt his light growing stronger than it had been in weeks. "No," he agreed, "but I am grateful for them." By the time reinforcements arrived from the other human ships, the 77th had held their position for 6 hours against overwhelming odds. They had lost 47 soldiers, brave men and women who would never see Earth again, but they had saved over 10,000. Stood among his weary troops, looking at the faces of soldiers who had given everything they had. He thought about the ones they had lost, and he made a silent promise to remember every single name. The battle for Prime was far from over, but humanity had made its presence known. Supreme Commander stood before the tactical display in his command center, watching his carefully planned invasion fall apart. His mandibles clicked in rapid agitation as report after report came in, each one worse than the last. His ground forces were being pushed back. His orbital superiority was crumbling. And more human ships kept appearing from hyperspace, an endless stream of these primitive vessels that refused to accept defeat. He had underestimated them. He could admit that now, at least to himself. When the first 12 human ships had appeared, he had laughed at their audacity. When they had destroyed his interceptor squadron, he had felt the first stirring of concern. Now, watching his fleet hemorrhage vessels against an enemy that should have been dust hours ago, he felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. He felt afraid. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. His tactical officer hesitated before answering. 112 vessels destroyed, Supreme Commander. Another 43 disabled. The humans have lost 6 ships, but their remaining vessels continue to fight at full effectiveness. Slammed one of his massive claws against the display console, cracking the surface. "Impossible. These are primitives. Their technology is inferior. Their numbers are a fraction of ours. How are they doing this?" No one answered. No one had an answer to give. In orbit above Prime, Commander Jake stood on the bridge of the relentless dawn, exhausted but still standing. His ship had taken heavy damage over the past 10 hours. 3 decks were completely sealed off. A quarter of his crew was in the medical bay. But the relentless dawn was still fighting, and so was every other human vessel that had made it this far. Lieutenant Kate appeared at his side with a steaming cup of coffee. She looked as tired as he felt, dark circles under her eyes and her uniform stained with smoke and blood. But there was something in her expression that looked almost like joy. "Fifth carrier group just arrived," she reported. 18 more ships. Admiral is aboard the Resolution. She is taking command of the reinforcement fleet." Jake accepted the coffee gratefully. Status of the enemy fleet. "They are pulling back toward the outer system. Our ground forces have secured the main population centers. They have retreated to their landing zones, but they are not getting off this planet." Kate allowed herself a small smile. "We are winning, sir." Jake took a long sip of his coffee. It tasted like victory and exhaustion and the bitter knowledge that many good people had died to make this moment possible. "We have not won yet. Still has over 100 ships. He could regroup, call for reinforcements from the Dominion." "He could," Kate agreed, "but I do not think he will." She was right. Within the hour, a transmission came through from the command ship. Supreme Commander appeared on the view screen, his compound eyes burning with barely contained rage. But beneath the rage, Jake could see something else. He could see defeat. Human Commander spoke, his voice filtered through translation software. "You have fought well, better than any species we have encountered. I offer terms of surrender." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "I am listening." "We will withdraw from space. We will release all prisoners. We will provide compensation for the damage we have caused." Paused, his mandibles clicking. "In exchange, you will allow my remaining forces to leave without pursuit." Jake considered the offer. Part of him wanted to refuse, to chase these monsters to the edge of the galaxy and make them pay for every innocent life they had taken. But he was not a man driven by vengeance. He was a man driven by duty, and his duty was to protect the people of Prime. "I accept your terms," he said, "but I have one more condition." Tilted his massive head, Name it. You will return to the Dominion and deliver a message. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity will not stand by while innocents are slaughtered. Tell them that if they threaten another peaceful world, we will come, every time, without hesitation. And we will keep coming until they learn that the galaxy is not theirs to terrorize. The transmission ended, stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then began issuing orders for withdrawal. On the surface of Prime, the news of victory spread quickly. Medic Laura worked through her 20th consecutive hour of treating wounded, both human and. She had never trained on physiology, had never even seen a before this mission. But she had adapted, improvised, and refused to let anyone die on her watch. Elder found her in the makeshift medical center that had been established in one of the surviving crystal halls. She was bent over a wounded child, carefully sealing a crack in the young one's crystalline shell with a specialized compound she had invented on the spot. "You are tired," observed, his voice gentle. "You should rest." Laura did not look up from her work. "I will rest when everyone is stable." "Your dedication is remarkable," moved closer, watching her skilled hands work. "I have been trying to understand your species. We sent distress signals to every civilization in the galaxy. Powerful empires, ancient races, beings with technology far beyond your own. They all refused to help. They calculated the risks and decided we were not worth saving." Laura finally looked up, meeting the Elder's luminous eyes. "Yeah, well, we are not very good at calculating risks." "Clearly," made a sound that might have been laughter. "But I do not think that is the real reason you came. I have watched your soldiers fight. I have watched your healers work. I have watched your people die for strangers they never met. This is not the behavior of a species that does not understand risk. This is the behavior of a species that has decided risk does not matter when innocent lives are at stake." Laura was quiet for a moment. She finished her work on the child and moved to the next patient. "Where I come from, we have this idea that if you can help someone, you should. It does not matter who they are or where they come from or what you might lose. If you can help, you help. It is pretty simple, really." Watched her for a long time. "Simple," he repeated softly. "Yes, I suppose it is. And yet no other species in the galaxy seems to understand it." Outside the medical center, the sky was clearing. The fleet was withdrawing, their dark shapes disappearing into hyperspace one by one. Human soldiers patrolled the streets, helping emerge from their hiding places, distributing food and medicine and comfort. Cole sat on a broken piece of crystal, watching the sun rise over a wounded city. Amy sat beside him, her rifle across her knees, her eyes distant. They had lost good people today. Friends, brothers and sisters in arms. "Was it worth it?" Amy asked quietly. Looked at the emerging into the light. He watched children rush to embrace their parents. He watched elders weep with relief. He watched a species that had expected to die discover that they were going to live. "Yeah," he said softly, "it was worth it." The battle for Prime was over, but its impact would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The Galactic Assembly had not seen this many representatives gathered in one place for over 300 years. Beings from 100 different worlds filled the massive chamber, their various forms creating a tapestry of life that would have amazed anyone seeing it for the first time. There were the tall, slender with their silver skin and calculating eyes. The delegation sat in their environmental pods, their aquatic forms rippling with nervous energy. The hunched in their seats, their massive bodies barely fitting in the spaces designed for smaller species. They had all come to hear Elder speak. News of what had happened on Prime had spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species, every civilization, every being with access to a communication network had heard the story. Now they wanted to hear it from someone who had been there. Stood at the central podium, his crystalline form blazing with light that had not dimmed since the day the humans had arrived. Behind him sat the human delegation. Commander Jake in his dress uniform, his face solemn and tired. Sergeant Cole, his wounds still healing, Lieutenant Kate, Private Amy, Medic Laura, and dozens of other soldiers who had fought and bled on a world they had never seen before. "I stand before you today," began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "because of the beings who sit behind me. I stand before you because my world still exists, because my people still live, because hope was not lost, even when we had given up on it." He paused, letting his words settle over the assembly. "When it came to Prime, we did what any civilized species would do. We called for help. We reached out to every ally, every trading partner, every civilization we had ever contacted. We asked for someone, anyone, to come to our aid." The ambassador shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The delegation grew very still. They told us that intervention would destabilize their trade agreements. They declared neutrality. They said they were too far away. Allowed a note of bitterness to enter his voice. Every advanced civilization in this galaxy, every ancient and powerful race, looked at our suffering and decided it was not their problem. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many species had the decency to look ashamed. And then the humans came. Turned to look at the human delegation. Jake met his gaze steadily. "I had never heard of humans before they appeared in our sky. Most of you probably had not either. They are a young species, barely 50 years into their journey among the stars. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Their numbers are small. By every measure that the civilized galaxy uses to judge worth and power, they are insignificant." He turned back to the assembly. "And yet they came. 12 ships against 300, 4,000 soldiers against an empire that has crushed dozens of worlds. They came knowing they would probably die. They came knowing there was nothing to gain. They came because a stranger called for help, and they could not bear to ignore that call." The chamber was completely silent now. I watched these humans fight for my world. I watched them bleed for people they had never met. I watched them die protecting children whose names they could not pronounce. Light pulsed with emotion. I watched a human soldier throw herself in front of a plasma blast meant for an elder. She did not know him. She had never spoken to him. But she took that shot without hesitation, and she nearly died doing it. He looked directly at Grace Palmer, who sat in the human delegation with her arm in a sling. When I asked her why, do you know what she said? She said it was the right thing to do, as if that explained everything. As if risking your life for a stranger was the most natural thing in the galaxy. Moved away from the podium, walking slowly among the assembled delegations. "You have all dismissed humanity as primitive, as young, as unimportant. You calculated that they were not worth your attention, not worth your respect, not worth your time. You were wrong. Humanity is the most remarkable species any of us have ever encountered. Not because of their technology or their military power or their economic influence, but because of their hearts, because they looked at a dying world full of beings they had never met and said, 'We will help, we will fight, we will sacrifice.'" He stopped in front of the ambassador. "Could you say the same? When the call for help came, did your people answer? Or did you count the cost and decide that compassion was too expensive?" The ambassador said nothing. There was nothing to say. Returned to the podium. Behind him, the human soldiers sat in perfect silence, uncomfortable with the praise being heaped upon them. They had not done what they did for glory or recognition. They had done it because it needed to be done. Humanity changed everything the day they landed on Prime. They showed us what the galaxy could be if we chose to make it so. They showed us that compassion is not weakness, that courage is not foolishness, that hope is never truly lost as long as there are those willing to answer the call. He turned one final time to face the human delegation. "On behalf of my people, and on behalf of every species that will never again face extinction alone, knowing that humanity walks among the stars, thank you. You have reminded us what it means to be truly civilized." The assembly erupted into applause. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. growing louder and louder as species after species rose to their feet. Even the ambassador found himself standing, his silver hands coming together in acknowledgement of what humanity had done. Jake remained seated, watching the celebration with quiet dignity. Kate touched his arm. "You did good, sir," she said softly. Jake shook his head slowly. "We did what was right, that is all any of us can do." After the ceremony, as the delegations began to disperse, Cole found himself standing on a balcony overlooking the vast assembly plaza. Amy joined him, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled vaguely like coffee. "It feels strange," Amy said, handing him a cup. "Being treated like heroes, we just did our jobs." Took a sip of the alien beverage and made a face. "That is what heroes always say, right before they go do something stupid and brave again." Amy laughed. "You think there will be a next time?" Looked out at the alien sky, filled with unfamiliar stars. Somewhere out there, other worlds were in danger. Other species were calling for help, and humanity was just getting started. "There is always a next time," he said, "and we will be there." The news spread across the galaxy in the days that followed. Humanity had arrived. They were primitive, perhaps, young, certainly, but they had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. They had shown that sometimes the measure of a species is not what they can take, but what they are willing to give. And nothing would ever be the same again.